So this is the measuring and leather cutting portion. I made a template here, as you can see, of the briefcase out of cardboard. I printed it out off of Adobe Illustrator. I can make a video on how I did that later. So this is a single shoulder of 7 to 8 ounce vegetable tanned leather, and I'm just measuring out the dimensions of the briefcase onto the leather, and marking where the panels would be, and marking where the front, the back, the side, the top would be on each side. And since this is the first time I'm doing this, I'm being extremely careful on the measurements. I'm using a square and then putting the template on top just to see if that works appropriately. And once that's done, I'll be able to get a better idea of how I want to cut the piece of leather. It's also important to note which part of the leather you're going to want to use on the shoulder. I wanted to maximize usage of the leather, so I picked one side of the leather to start. That way I can use the other side for other projects potentially in the future. Another way to go about this would be to pick the center of the leather, which may have less irregularities or etc., but then you would ultimately limit what remaining pieces of leather you have. So this worked for me. I think I checked the other side of the leather and it didn't have too many blemishes on there. So I have it, it's kind of hard to see here, but you can see that there's the top flap, the portion of the handle, the top where the handle would be, the front, the bottom, and the back. I was just testing out the scalpel, and then I have this self-healing green cutting mat, which I've placed beneath the leather so that I don't scratch my table, and I'm just putting the straight edge along and taking the scalpel and cutting down slowly and just marking the edge. The scalpel that I was using was not very sharp, as you can see in my later videos. I ended up buying a utility knife, so I have to go through this a couple of times, but it's important to just be patient and just score a couple of times until it lifts up, and then you can continue moving down the work and make the cuts appropriately. And once I have this piece cut off completely, I'll be able to move that part onto the center part of the table, and it'll be a lot easier to work with. This is a single shoulder, so it's roughly 7 to 10 square feet, so maybe 3 by 4 feet, something like that. So once I get this cut off, I'll be able to roll up the remaining piece and use that for other projects. As you can see here, it's very, very slow and it's hard to use. I'm trying to push down on the scalpel, but at one point here the scalpel blade actually bends. So I think I would recommend using a utility knife over a scalpel for cutting through the leather. I mean, the scalpel probably has other purposes, maybe for tooling the leather or fine cuts on thinner weight leathers. So I'm finally, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that you always want to make sure that you have extra leather on, just in case you need other pieces, for the project, like which I ended up using. So I'm going to use this whole piece, and then I use little pieces for the strap and the side. So that's what I'm measuring out here. I'm measuring out, the side gussets off the piece of leather. I know the dimensions of that, what the leather is going to be, and to save the leather, I'm just going to mark out the side gussets on each side. In addition, some extra spare pieces just in case I need it for other portions of the build, like the handle and etc. So at the time, I didn't actually plan that far ahead because I ended up needing more leather than I needed. So instead of cutting this part off, I probably would have, in hindsight, just stained this entire piece. That way I would have extra leather with the same staining, as opposed to having to go back and stain another piece of leather, because that way the leather would be very uniform, because it would be all stained from a single piece. But as you can see, the part that I'm cutting off is a little bit bent and not as of great quality. So it ended up working out in the end, and I think the subtle changes, color differences, and in certain aspects of the staining actually work out well and sort of give it a unique look. So once I get this cut out, I'll be able to sort of see what the briefcase might be, what it might look like in comparison to the model that I had printed out, and then I'll move on to doing the oiling and the staining. I wanted to separate this into multiple videos because otherwise the video would just be too long, and that way I can do different parts for people who are interested in the various aspects of the briefcase making. So as you can see, it took me a while to cut through this with the scalpel, but I'll eventually get there. I also think if you have the money, you can buy a larger mat. That way you don't have to keep moving the self-healing cutting mat up and down every time you cut. But that mat is like roughly 12 by 18 inches, something like that. Almost through. I ended up using, all these scraps of leather as well for other things. Okay, so it's about to come off here, and then I'll be able to roll up the leather and sort of see what it would look like as a briefcase. And the next step is oiling and staining. So the briefcase would be something like this. It would kind of flap over. It's a little bit rolled at the moment, but that's what the briefcase would look like. All right, until the next video.